You know the OCG's on some next level shit when they're teching Lord Gaia the Fierce Knight. What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I wanted to discuss spirals and the impact that they're having in the OCG. Now, I know I don't usually talk about the OCG too much in my videos, but in this case, I felt this is something definitely worth discussing because from an analysis standpoint, this is actually just insane. So for those of you who don't know, SPYRAL is just absolutely crushing and dominating the OCG because their format is very different than ours. So SPYRAL is pretty much the dominant deck. There are still some other rogue decks like Heroes and Infernoids, just barely trying to hang on, but for the most part, if you're a competitive player, you're playing SPYRAL at the moment. And it's just absurd because the format has developed to the point where I think a lot of people would consider to be a tier 0 format. And you know it's a tier 0 format when people are teching in the cards in the main deck that we're about to discuss in this video. Now, one thing I do want to discuss is on Road to the King, you might have seen some of these pie charts that show SPYRAL's representation in the current meta. You have to realize that some of those meta pie charts are based off of locals representation and not necessarily any high caliber events. But this past weekend or within the past couple weeks, there was a big event, the Hati Grand Championship 2017, which is pretty much revered as one of, if not the most competitive large-scale event in all of Japan, which means it's getting the highest caliber of players who are all just coming out to battle it out for the top. And I feel that this serves as a much more accurate representation of the meta, especially when we see the meta breakdown. And when we look at the meta breakdown, 172 players out of the 256 participants were playing SPYRAL. That comes out to 67% of the meta, of the field for that matter, being completely comprised of SPYRALs. And 67% maybe in the context of comparing it to like 92% like we've seen on some of these other pie charts may not seem as large, but you need to realize that means over the course of a 256-man event, every 2 out of 3 people are playing SPYRALs. That is just fucking unheard of unless we're in a tier 0 or a tier 0.5 format, which is just absurd. So the fact that it is now shown in the OCG that on a competitive level, especially a high tier competitive level like this, that there's that much representation in the open field, not even when you get to the top cut, is just crazy and shows the dominance that SPYRAL currently has in the OCG meta. Now, there were some interesting texts that I wanted to discuss because in this article they did discuss double summon. Now, before we get into these cards though, I want to remind you that the OCG format is very well developed because their format has been going on longer than ours, so by comparison, you don't want to really extrapolate everything from the OCG into the TCG because, like, let's say you're going to YCS Dallas this upcoming weekend. If you take some of the logic here and apply it to YCS Dallas and us having SPYRALs for the first weekend they're legal, it's not going to work out well for you, but maybe if our format starts to develop like the OCG, then maybe this is something you might want to take note on. I just wanted to give you some food for thought for the most part. So, going back to double summon, so if you notice in some of these lists, some of the players decided not to play machine duplication, which if you're a SPYRAL player or if you're someone who understands SPYRALs, you're probably thinking to yourself, that sounds absurd, right? Well, the logic is behind it. They were playing double summon instead of machine duplication because machine duplication not only loses to Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, but it also loses pretty hard to Max C, where double summon kind of can circumvent those hand traps and ultimately achieve the same boards that you might want that you would get off of machine duplication. Now, obviously, machine duplication is kind of just like this auto win card if it's activated, so it's kind of an interesting choice to say, well, I'm not going to run it at all and just pretty much to circumvent hand traps, but the format in the OCG is developed now to the point where double summon is an interesting choice because if you want to make sure your plays go through and dodge these hand traps, because you know that everyone's running not only the 3 Ash Blossom, but they have 2 Max C in Japan, so that's something you also have to keep keep in mind when it comes to the differences between the OCG and the TCG, that's a really big deal. Now, the other thing that I wanted to discuss, and this just blows my fucking mind because this is just hilarious. One of the players, the one that they discussed in the article that I'm referencing here, was main decking Lord Gaia the Fierce Knight. In the instance where he got hit by set rotation, his opponent gave him Gateway to Chaos, he was actually able to activate and resolve the Gateway to Chaos, search Lord Gaia the Fierce Knight, and then ultimately break out of set rotation and go about doing his plays. That to me is just fucking mind-blowing because the fact that their format is so well developed that you can actually play a card like Lord Gaia and it's actually effective enough that it's a good enough call to work is just fucking phenomenal, and I just can't believe that they are just on this like whole other level when it comes to their meta. And it gets better than that. It gets better than that because not only did he do that, but he also side decked one copy of Oracle of Zephyra to swap for the Gateway of Chaos in case his opponent might be siding into or main decking Lord Gaia so that he can side into it to give him the Oracle to make the Lord Gaia a dead card in his deck. This is like next level on top of next level thinking, but it actually did him well because this is the deck that got first place after the first day. Now, it was a 2-tier staged event. Actually, I believe it was a 3-tier staged event, and the players were actually allowed to modify their deck lists moving into the top cut, which I found rather interesting. Now, when it broke down to the top cut, 27 of the top 32 players were actually playing SPYRAL, which so now when we get into the top cut representation means 84% of the field were playing SPYRALs. Again, and you have to realize these are the players who made it to the top cut, so these are the best of the best in this instance. So now the representation for SPYRAL has actually increased because we've removed kind of a lot of the other filler. A couple of Infernoids managed to make it in there as well, but again, SPYRAL is still the dominating force. And when it comes to their modified deck list, some of the players were actually just main decking the Oracle of Zephyra instead of the Gateway to Chaos, afraid that after seeing the Lord Gaia tech, people might tech Lord Gaia themselves. And again, just trying to next level people and get just one step ahead, having the Oracles to make that card dead, and also removing the Lord Gaia from his list entirely because he knew people were probably going to be main decking the Oracle as well in his same line of thinking. So again, I really just kind of wanted to discuss this with you to show how a well-defined format really kind of evolves, because even though the deck itself at its core is still the same, there's still these little nuances and these little changes that the deck undergoes to help refine it and help give the players an advantage when it comes to the mirror match. Again, the things like the double summon adjustment over the machine duplication. Machine duplication might be an auto win, but double summon not only helps circumvent hand traps, but it also allows you to continue your plays without the fear of those hand traps hurting you as well, even if it might not necessarily win you the game outright. It's kind of worth the payoff that if you can dodge 5 of your opponent's hand traps and still get to play, maybe not make a board that's as absurd, it's still going to get you there. And in a lot of instances, if your opponent doesn't have an out to it, it's still going to win you the game anyway, so it's the more effective call. And then the next level text is still something that just blows my mind entirely that I can't get out of my head, but ultimately, guys, I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to think in the comments down below about what it really you guys think about when it comes to this OCG meta. Now, we can kind of say here in the TCG it's going to be really interesting because we have a lot of different factors. We have a different ban list. We have decks that are still playable here by comparison to the OCG, like Draco and ABC at full power by comparison to the OCG as well. We have 3 copies of Terraforming. There's a lot of different variables and factors to take into account when it comes to the TCG version of SPYRAL that I'm really curious to not only hear what you guys have to think, but also how you guys think it's going to evolve beyond YCS Dallas, because I think when the format starts to define itself a little bit more as we approach something like YCS San Diego in November, it's going to have a profound impact on the format, and players are going to have to be adjusting tremendously once we're post the release of Circuit Break. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Again, let me know down in the comments what you guys think about all of this. this. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video informative, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.